Good morning. We're back again with a different Bible study this time. We are doing the book of Ruth, and we find some very interesting things in the book of Ruth. For instance, when we look at Ruth verse 1, we find that it says, "And it happened in the days when the judges judged, there was a famine in the land, and a man went from Bethlehem in Judea to sojourn in the fields of Moab, he, his wife, and his 2 sons. The man's name was Elimelech, his wife's name was Naomi, and his 2 sons were named Malchan or Malchalon and Kilian." Okay, now, first off, we have some things that we need to discuss. In the days when the judges judged, there was no king. This is right after they came into the land. The first 2 chapters, the first 2 books of the Holy Scriptures, Judges and Joshua and Judges, tell us about that era of time. And during that era of time, every man did as he thought was right in the eyes of the Lord. But they did have judges. And so these judges would make rulings over disputes and things like this. But there was no king in the land. If you remember correctly, in the Old Testament, we have Saul is the first king of Israel. And then Saul, as we discussed last time in the book of Esther, Saul did not do what he was told to do by God. Therefore, he lost his kingship, and David became king. And so now we have in this particular book, the book of Ruth, we have some things that are very interesting. Now, the first thing it says is that in the days of the judges, there was a famine in the land. Famines were not uncommon. They could be caused by drought. They could be caused by disease on the plants. But a famine did not necessarily mean that there was no food in the land. The famine would have destroyed the wheat crops and the barley crops, but they still had maybe the olives, and they had figs. They also had their animals they could eat if they needed to. So there was food in the land, but it was not widespread, and everybody was in want. And this word famine expands itself even to the point that the famine is not just for physical food. A famine could also mean that there is a lack of spiritual direction in the land. This is what we find ourselves in many times. We have no direction. We have no spiritual direction. We have people that are supposed to be our leaders, yet they have no spiritual direction for us. And this man, Elimelech, that's what we've always called him, Elimelech, he was kind of a unique person. He lived in Bethlehem, but yet he was most likely, and many commentaries say this, that he was one of the richest men around. So if you're very wealthy and you own the banks, or you own a lot of property and you have a lot of money, and you've gathered up a lot of provisions and things like this, when people are starving, they come to you. to borrow money. They come to you to get food. They come to you for their substance. However, considering the fact that he was also one of the greatest scholars of his time, they came to him for spiritual direction. And he just kind of got tired of putting up with people. He lost his interest of putting up with people, them coming and saying, I've got this problem here, I've got this problem here, I need money, I need counseling, I need help, tell me what to do. He decided that he would escape the entire situation. So he packed up his wife, Naomi, their two boys, Killian and Malcolm, and they just up and moved to the land of Moab. Now, Moab is outside of Israel. It's down by the Dead Sea. It's off out in toward the Gulf of Aqaba, but it's outside of Israel. He thought, I will escape. I will get over there. I'll keep the money I've got. I'll keep the food I've got. Nobody will know me. Nobody will know that I know God, that I know what's going on in the land. So he moved to Moab. Now, Moab is kind of a country that we don't really understand. We don't really talk about much because we don't know about it, except with a little bit of research, we find out that Moab is from one of Lot's daughters. If you remember back the story of Sodom and Gomorrah in the book of Genesis, I believe it's in Genesis chapter 19, after the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, there was Lot and his two daughters were all that were left. They lived at a town called Zoar, Z-O-A-R. This is chapter 19, verse, looks like verse 30. And the two girls decided there's not any other men around. We're getting kind of older, and so we need to repopulate the earth. So they got their father drunk, each one of them on a different night. They got their father drunk. They went into and had sex with their father. And so Moab was the first boy that was born, and the word Moab means of the father. And the second boy that was born to the other daughter, his name was Ammon. And so that's where we get the two countries, Moab and the Ammonites. So Elimelech moved his family, Naomi and his two sons, what possessions that he still had, what money he still had, and all of his spiritual guidance, of course, and he moved down to the land of Moab. And it happened that his name was Elimelech. We call him Elimelech. We'll explain that just a little bit in the Gesenius Hebrew Chaldean lexicon. We have the word Elimelech to mean, as a translation, it would mean to whom God is king. Some would say it means my God is king. It's could be pronounced Eli, which is my God. Melech is king, so my God is king. if my God is king, then you should do what God asks you to do. Now, I know people have different personalities, and I know that people have different wants and desires. But here we have a man that deserts his natural native land in order to save what he's got because of the big famine, and he just up and leaves. And so this is the first thing that has happened in the book of Ruth.